Alright, this story is called Hunting Trip, written by Objective Tal 6047. I grew up in a rural area of Wexford County in northern Michigan. It was a small town where I lived. There was the elementary and high school, both always on the verge of financial collapse. Some businesses on the main street also always about to close permanently. The town only had one stoplight. The houses there were always either upscale fancy homes or old abandoned shacks. The job prospects up north were limited at best. I lived at least 30 minutes away from anywhere in the countryside. Suffice it to say, I live in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't have a lot of happy memories growing up there. So when the opportunity came to south, I took it. I ended up living near the Michigan-Ohio border and got a regular job. The move proved to be a great start for me. A couple months ago, my cousin Duane invited me to go on a hunting trip with his friends, Joel, Micah, and Aaron. I remembered all of them from school. It was just after the opening of deer season, which was a major pastime in northern Michigan. It was an activity I never took part in, mostly because I never found myself enjoying it. Regardless, I decided to go anyway, if only to catch up with my cousin and some school friends. I left for a long weekend and eventually made it to my cousin's house, which sat between the towns of Messick and Buckley. No one had arrived yet, so Duane got me suited up in all the hunting gear, most of which I didn't have the names for. The only things I recognized were the camouflage suit and a 2-barrel rifle. He remembered I never used a gun before, so he took me out to the backyard for a couple of practice rounds. We were far from any houses that the sound of a gunshot wouldn't be too much of a problem. He set up the target for me and gave me a quick lesson on how to use it. Keep steady, both eyes open, slow your breathing. I gave off a couple of rounds pretty close to the center of the target, only off by a couple of inches. It felt surprisingly good to shoot a couple rounds. The rest of the group made it and we left the house with a couple of pickup trucks. We were going to Farnsworth Lake in Manton. There was a spot my cousin liked to hunt around the lake called the Garland Swamp. The scenic drive brought back memories of the countless drives to and from school and anywhere else. I had forgotten how beautiful it was up here. We eventually made it back to the best campsite we could. Everywhere else was taken. We split into two groups. Duane and I took a position near the marshland while the others went the other direction. This was an ideal spot because deer could come and take a drink. We were out there for several hours before finally seeing our deer approach the water. I let Duane take the first shot. It was in his sights before another gunshot was heard in the distance. The sound caused the deer to retreat into the forest. Duane cursed, saying he had it in his line of fire. We'd only seen one more deer before sundown, and we missed that opportunity as well. By sunset, Duane and I walked back to our campsite empty-handed. We were just reminiscing about some incident from school when, down the trail, we saw the remains of a deer carcass, rotting in a ditch. It looked like an old kill, judging from the smell and how bloated it was. It seemed too sick and rotting for any predators to come and finish it off. Only flies indulged as they assaulted the carcass. We had to leave fast, in case this deer would attract any predators, assuming it hadn't already. We made it back to the campsite, the others beginning to build a fire as we approached. It seemed they were unlucky as well. We didn't go hungry, however, that night. We had seemingly endless supply of highly processed meats, mac and cheese, and cheap beer that tasted like piss running down my throat. The s'mores at the end were the only salvation on this onslaught of the taste buds. After the meal, we engaged in the most favorite of campfire activities, ghost stories. No one had any good suggestions until Joel gave one. The Dog Man, a story we all knew growing up near the North Woods. The Dog Man originally started out as a joke by a Traverse City DJ named Steve Cook. He created a song called The Legend on April 1st, 1987. The song was about detailed accounts people gave about seeing a large dog that walked like a person and screamed an unearthly howl every night. In fact, the first recorded sighting, if you're not including tribal folklore about the same monster, had started in the same spot we were camping in that night. It was near a logging cabin, and some lumberjacks were chasing a dog around until it hid behind some wood. Someone grabbed a stick and poked it. It howled at them and stood upright. Other stories include farmers found dead with large dog prints around them, sounds of screaming, and reports of the monster grinning at people. Though the song started as a joke, people came forward to the DJ and related their own encounters with a similar creature. Everyone in the group, besides me, had an encounter or knew someone who did. Micah relayed how there's a sheep rancher who lived down the road from him who lost a lot of his flock one night a few months ago. His flock of 50 sheep had been reduced to 29. The dead ones were found mauled with large red streak marks on their bodies, as if they were slashed. There were also large bite marks found on their necks. The wire fencing that kept them inside and coyotes out were found to be torn or bitten apart. Aaron had seen large dog prints circling around his property. Joel was the only one who had claimed to have seen something. A couple nights ago, he claimed, he looked out the window to see a pair of bright yellow orbs hiding in the trees on his property. To him, they looked like eyes. He said from the distance between the eyes and the ground, whatever it was had to be tall, easily about 7 feet. It stared back at him for a couple of minutes before he left to get his gun. He came back outside, loaded. By the time he got there, whatever caused those bright orbs outside had disappeared. Of course, I didn't buy any of this. I always thought of it as some mix of folk tales, misidentifications, and hallucinations. It was a good ghost story, but that's all it was. A ghost story. With no more encounters to share, and the cheap beer starting to kick in, we put out the fire with water and got into our tents. There were only 3 of them, so a few of us had to partner up for the night. Duane and I shared one while the others split up. I didn't take very long for sleep to take hold of me. I was later awakened in the late hours by Duane. He was outside the tent, sounding like he was in a panic. I got outside the tent to see him pacing back and forth around the fire pit. I asked him what was wrong, then he urged me to be quiet. He looked at the darkness ahead, then we heard growling. A deep, guttural kind of growling from a large animal. It was somewhere hiding in the trees and it was circling us. During this, Duane set some extra firewood together we had next to the pit. He took his container of lighter fluid and covered the wood with a flammable liquid. He then struck one match and threw it into the wood, which caught fire immediately. The area of our camp became illuminated by the bright yellowish-orange glow of firelight. The growling, which seemed a lot closer, still seemed to come from nowhere. I was thinking at first it was a coyote, but they'd run in the presence of humans. The fire finally did reveal something as it reflected the bright glow of the flame. A pair of bright yellow, equally distant orbs were revealed. Duane grabbed his rifle as quickly as he could, never taking his eyes off of whatever was in front of us. The growling got louder and louder as the orbs got closer and closer, until we finally found out what they were. The orbs were in fact a pair of eyes. Eyes that belonged to a large dog or wolf. This thing was huge, almost as big as Duane's truck as it walked next to it. It was covered in thick black fur like the darkness around it. It was snarling at us, blood dripping from its mouth, as if from a fresh kill. Duane and I were making loud noises and intimidating gestures to make ourselves look bigger. The dog responded in the most jaw-dropping way. It pushed its upper body off the ground and stood perfectly on its hind legs. I shit you not. It stood upright, exposing a human-like torso, blood and leaves covering its underside. It stood that way far longer than any dog should be able to. Duane and I looked back at the beast with a look of dumbfounded horror. The thing sniffed the air in front of us, and we were filled with dread after what it did next. Its jowls, or lips that looked like jowls, curled upwards, revealing more bloody teeth. It grinned at us. It was grinning at us. So help me God, it gave the most human-like, bloody teeth-filled grin that no animal on this earth should be able to replicate. That unnatural smile, as if taking a cruel delight in our dumbfounded horror, was enough to fill us both with pants-shitting terror. It jumped to the right on all fours, coming toward me. I was able to duck and miss it as it jumped above me, and then I heard my cousin screaming of danger. It had charged after him instead. I turned in his direction to hear the chorus of screams and the tearing of flesh. I saw it tearing at his body and biting into his shoulder, pretty close to the neck. I had to reach for the rifle before he was done for. While it was still loaded, I took aim with the machine shaking in my hands. I remember what Dwan told me during my practice shots. Slow your breathing. Both eyes open. Relax your nerves. Boom. The bullet had hit the monster in its rear shoulder. A small explosion of blood and muscle was all I saw before the force of the blow knocked me off balance. As I hit the ground, the creature gave off a howl of pain. It sounded like a wolf howling and human scream mix. The sound, so unearthly in its tone and nature, sent a chill down my spine. I sat straight up to see the animal run off into the darkness of the forest, leaving a trail of blood behind it. The others were roused out of their half-drunk sleep to see the commotion, but immediately sobered up at the sight of my cousin bleeding on the ground. He had 5 large, deep slash marks on his torso, and a huge bite mark on his shoulder, where he was bleeding the heaviest. Given how much blood he was losing, and the fact that the nearest hospital was at best 30 minutes away, we had to do something fast. Aaron took its heavy-duty boots and kicked off the firewood to expose hot ash and coals underneath the flame. He gathered some coals in a pot, and the metal heated instantly. He pressed the hot metal on Duane's neck, and the smell of burning flesh filled our nostrils. At the very least, we slowed the bleeding. We packed up what essentials we needed and got in Duane's truck. We hightailed all the way to the closest hospital. Duane spent the night in the ER. Thankfully, he survived, but no longer had the full use of his arm. The muscle fibers and nerves suffered too much damage. We had to file a police report even though we knew the cops wouldn't believe our story. We ended up telling them that we were attacked by some wolf or rabid dog. A hunting party was formed the next day to track it down. They found our campsite as we described it, and the bloody spot where I shot the animal. They followed the trail of blood which ended at a nearby river. The trail seemingly ended there. I was at the hospital all night to make sure that Duane would be okay. Aside from the injury and the trauma from the experience, the doctor said he'd be okay. I left later that morning, and this time I would never come back up north. After coming home, I did something I never thought I'd do. I purchased a gun. I kept in contact with Duane after that, always checking on how he was recuperating. We never talked about that night. I think he wanted to forget, or at least to not acknowledge it. I couldn't forget, though. I could never forget those bright yellow eyes. I could never forget how it stood on its hind legs like a person. I could never forget that unnatural teeth-filled grin it gave us. And I could never forget that inhuman, and yet human-sounding scream howl it gave off as it retreated into the North Woods' darkness. This next story is called, If You Ever Hear a Cry for Help While Camping, You Better Ignore It. Written by Horror Mode. I love camping, but after my most recent trip, I don't think it will ever be the same. I set up my tent on a nice flat ground and collected some wood for fire. The night came with all its nightly sounds, and I relaxed at the hooting howls and chirping crickets. Even better was the fact that no one else was around. Or so I thought. Help. It was subtle. I almost missed it. The voice came from deep within the woods, and for a moment I didn't believe what I was hearing. It sounded female, but oddly enough, I just couldn't tell. Please help, it continued. I shined my flashlight between the bushes and walked around a little. To be completely honest, even as a grown man, I was paralyzed with fear. So I did the responsible thing and called the police. That's when things went from odd to very, very weird. The police told me to ignore it. I explained to them that someone could be injured and probably needed medical attention, but they assured me otherwise. When I kept pushing and asked why, the police told me, "Sir, if you ever hear that voice again, ignore it. Do not respond." Well, I did hear it again, but I didn't ignore it. It was almost midnight when I heard the voice a second time. I awoke to someone whispering help, and it sounded like she was just outside my tent. I went out to check and no one was there. But the voice continued from a distance. "Help, please." Again, I grabbed my flashlight and looked around the area I was camping. I was too afraid to follow the voice into the woods, especially since the authorities themselves avoided it. But I struggled morally, trying to decide whether I should go and help this person or listen to the police, who seemed concerned for my safety. But then I heard another, different voice. This other voice, which also seemed to be coming from the woods, was an octave lower. Unlike the first one, which cried for help, this one was loud and demanding. "Quiet," the other voice growled. "No one's going to help you." Once I heard that, I was sure someone was in trouble. I called the police again. When I informed them about a second voice coming from the woods, the police seemed even more concerned. They told me that I should pack my things and leave the campsite immediately. They said that hearing the second, more manly voice meant that it was getting desperate. They also said that the two voices were coming from the same person. That part was bizarre and confused me, to say the least. It was at this point I dismissed the police in that area as crazy, but not before telling them off. I got angry. I told the police that if they didn't get down here to come and check it out, then I would do it myself. I said repeatedly that a woman would be in serious trouble and that their duty was to help her, but they still refused to come. All they kept repeating to me over the phone was, "Do not enter the woods, sir." They seemed more afraid than I was. Once I hung up the phone, I heard the voices again. A gentle, "Please, somebody help me," and then a growling, "Quiet, no one's coming." It was a little past midnight at that point. I couldn't live with myself knowing that I had the chance to save someone's life, but instead cowered. So I grabbed some things and ventured into the woods. When I entered the woods, the voices ceased. Just like that. No cries, no whispers, and no commands. Even the owls and crickets went away. Nothing but dancing leaves and creaking tree branches could be heard. I stopped walking and looked around. A full 360 degrees. "Hello? Anyone here?" I called out. Nothing. "I'm here to help," I continued. "Where are you? Are you okay?" Still nothing. I thought of calling the police again, then chuckled to myself. I found it strange but somewhat comforting that I didn't find anyone out here, especially since I kept hearing it over and over again throughout that night. Nonetheless, I was still creeped out, so I packed my things and finally left the campsite. I didn't know why the police of all people were so afraid. Worst case, someone was in actual danger and we've all failed them. Best case, morons who think saying "help me" in the middle of nowhere is a good idea for a joke. To be honest, when I heard the voice the very first time, I did think it was a joke. When I heard it the second time along with that other voice, I became a bit more concerned. And same with the third time I heard it in the woods. But when I heard it again a fourth time, a week after I left the campsite, coming from inside my own house, I was very, very concerned. Alright, this next story is called I've Been Signed Up for the Weirdest Camp in the World by Clownfish Peanut. 1 unread email. Open? Yes. Well, howdy there, Allie. First of all, congratulations. You have been selected to lead dorm number 6 at Camp Hill Rock. Your salary of $3,072 will be deposited into your bank account, using the details you provided on your registration form after the week-long camp has finished. You'll be working from June 23rd through June 30th. If this schedule doesn't fit your time frame, please specify when it does in your response to this email. Now, before you come here, there are a few handy rules you'll need to follow. Failure to follow these rules could result in a withdrawal of salary, expulsion from campsite, or death. Rules for camp leaders. You have 7 campers which you are responsible for over the duration of this camp. Upon introducing yourself, please make sure to learn their names. At Camp Hill Rock, we want all campers to feel comfortable. However, if one of you campers introduces themselves as Joey, please make sure to alert a full-time employee as soon as possible. Full-time employees wear neon caps and are usually easy to spot. Number 2. It's important that campers get a good night's sleep. Bedtime is at 9 o'clock sharp, and I do mean sharp. We aren't responsible to what happens to anyone who's not in their dorm by then. Also, make sure to lock the doors, windows, bathroom doors, vents, and the trap door under the 3rd bunk bed on the left each night. 3. You'll soon meet the other dorm leaders. Due to privacy reasons, we can't disclose their names yet. But we can assure you that we do not and have only once employed a leader by the name of Sarah. If you meet a leader by the name of Sarah, please don't engage in conversation, and kindly alert a full-time employee. Sarah was Joey's sister. 4. Our happy little campers love to swim. However, they must be supervised, wearing an orange life vest, and the sun must be up. If you ever spot a swimmer wearing a green life vest, please calmly direct your group out of the water. If you see a swimmer with a black life vest, don't bother being calm. If a camper's boat is rocking while they are at the lake, do not attempt to rescue them. Alert a full-time employee immediately and take the rest of your group away from the area. It's best if they don't see. 5. Tapping on windows and doors at night is common, and it's often simply a branch. If you feel the need to investigate, please check an analog clock or digital alarm to make sure that it is not 2:56 or 3:42 a.m. Do not check your phone. If it is this time, remain in your bed, and preferably pull the covers over your head. Number 6. Dorm number 8 is our final dorm. If you meet a group of people stating that they are from dorm number higher than this, please direct them to a camp leader. If, however, they say they are from dorm number 17, immediately walk away. Don't listen to the whispering in your ear, and if someone taps your shoulder, do not turn around. Number 7. The cafeteria food at Camp Hill Rock is to a very high standard, and we have 3 lovely chefs on duty: Ronald, Cherie, and Christy. We do not have a chef by the name of Klaus, and any food which is served by him should be thrown into the bin as soon as possible. Make sure that he doesn't see it though. He takes offense. 8. Many former campers have left their marks on the tree by either carving or writing their initials into it. The tree is located in the center of our pavilion. If you see scratch marks dripping with blood or runes carved into the tree, please notify one of the full-time employees. Under no circumstance may children climb the tree. They may fall and kill themselves, or worse. 9. If a camper attempts to run away from their group activities or campsite, alert a full-time employee. You may attempt to chase them, but do not follow them to A, over the lake, B, across the cornfield, or C, through the woods. Thank you for taking the time to read our rules. Please sign below if you would like to remain a camp leader. Please read the terms and conditions attached below and select yes below. Hope to see you soon. Leader Davy. What's that? My flatmate says as she walks up behind me, her words muffled by the mouthful of Hawaiian she's just bitten. Some weird email. And isn't that pizza mine? I said, my nose wrinkling at the wet sounds of my sister's chewing. Anna leans over my shoulder, bringing her eating noises unfortunately close to my ear. Finders keepers, she says absentmindedly, her brow crinkling as she reads on. It's so weird, isn't it? I say, laughing off the uneasy feeling that's settled in the pit of my stomach. I think you should do it. I whip my head around to face Anna, to look her in the eyes and make sure she hasn't been possessed or something. You're not serious. It's obviously a scam. I never signed up for this bullshit. Anna looks away and, uncomfortable under my gaze. Allie, you know we've been struggling with the rent. Mr. Asshole Landlord raised it again and, well, Sally's dad caught us. Sally was Anna's girlfriend. They'd met at work and had been dating for only a few months before Sally decided to tell Anna that her dad was not only homophobic, but was applying to be manager of the clothes store where they both earned their pay. When Sally's father had gotten the job, Anna had promised me that she and P in PDA now stood for private. You're joking. A small shake of her head confirms my fears. You said you'd keep a lid on it at work, and really? After the costs of living go up, there's no way we'll be able to afford to keep this flat now. As dingy as our small 2-bedroom flat was, it was all Anna and I had. After we completed year 12, our parents had basically kicked us out, and we'd had to scramble to get this close to our university. Losing this apartment would be disastrous. Anna looked sheepishly at the ground. I know. I thought I'd locked the door, but it's fine, Allie. All you have to do is look after some whiny kids for a week, and we have rent for the rest of the month, plus a lot left over. I shake my head. Anna couldn't just leave this for me to fix, not this time. Just go, Anna. This isn't my problem to resolve. I watch her sadly leave the room. Sitting back down at the computer, I reread the email. Anger boils in me. That a stupid scam like this is causing problems with me and my only sister. Nothing but a scam, I mutter, slamming down the lid of my laptop, looking out the grimy window. I realize that night is beginning to fall. I may as well get some sleep. I've finished all of my assignments, and there's no point staying awake just to brood. A rustling noise in my room wakes me up, and I instinctively grab my phone and turn on the torch. I shine it around my room until I see something. In the computer by my desk, a hunched shape is lurching in the corner, tapping away at the keys. I can't quite suppress the scream in time, and its head snaps towards me, revealing shining blue eyes. Anna? I yell incredulously. She smiles sheepishly and runs out of the room, leaving the door open a sliver. I get out of bed to shut it, rolling my eyes at my sister's odd behavior. She's left the computer lid open too, so I go over to shut it. And that's when I saw it. The email from earlier open. There's one difference though. It's been tagged yes, and there's a new email from Leader Davy. Part 2 of I've been signed up for the weirdest camp in the world. One unread email. Open? Yes. Hi again, Allie. The other full-time employees and I were overjoyed to receive your approval. A bus will arrive for you tomorrow morning at 3:41 a.m. We chose you for a reason and can't wait to see you soon. Thanks again for agreeing to attend Camp Hill Rock, and we are excited to see you soon. Hope to see you soon, Leader Davy. It's been 3 days since I first received my email, and my third day at Camp Hill Rock has just begun. I have to say, my sister signing me up might not have been so bad. Despite all the weird rules, I'm still kicking, and if having to clean up one of my campers' vomit is worth paying me $3,000, I'll do it any day. I sit up in my bed and look out of the dorm's window. The sun rose a few minutes ago, judging by its position in the sky, and I take a peek at my phone. 6:38. Sigh. The breakfast bell rings at 7 o'clock, so there's no point going back to sleep. I rise out of my bed and check that all of my campers are still asleep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All the beds are full and, satisfied, I leave the dorm, carefully shutting the door behind me. I decide to walk out to the lake, where another camp leader has evidently taken his group. Wait. I approach carefully, painfully aware of rule number 6. But then the leader turns around and I can see that it's Joel, leader of dorm number 3. I playfully punch his shoulder, smiling as he turns around. "Hey," he says, his handsome face breaking into a smile. He looks about a year or two older than me, and we've been subtly flirting since our first day here. "Hi, what are you doing up this early?" I reply, looking out at the lake. 3 of us campers are swimming, all with orange life vests, I note, and the rest have split into pairs and are racing their canoes. The kids wanted to go out on the lake, so I figured, why not? I nod in agreement. My campers are the same. They love running around the campsite. We look out at the camp for a moment, awkwardness steadily growing. "So, do..." We both start at the same time, and I smile at him. "What were you saying?" "I was just wondering, when this camp is over..." I beam inwardly, eagerly awaiting what I hope to be an invitation to date. "Would you want to catch up sometime, or get a coffee or something?" "Yeah." I open my mouth to answer, and that's when I see it. Out on the Mirror Flat Lake, one of the canoes has begun to rock violently. The campers sitting on it are gripping the edges, and as I look closer, I can see long black claws slowly rising out of the water. I grab Joel in a panic and spin him around so they can see the predicament taking place. "Look, the boat, rocking!" His face drops in a way that would be comical if we weren't scared out of our minds. He blows his whistle and the swimmers look up at him sadly, blissfully ignorant of the dire situation we are currently in. I rush back to the campsite, looking for a neon cap. There. "Rule number 4, rockin'!" I yelp at the camp leader, my mind reduced to mush by the panic. He nods and rushes past me, moving at a phenomenal speed. I rush behind him, my legs powered by adrenaline. When I arrive back at the lake, I see that Joel has successfully coaxed the swimmers out of the water, but the other canoe remained out, either oblivious or just ignoring his yells. "Take them," I say to him. "I'll get the other canoe." He nods, panic in his eyes. I watch him leaving for a moment, the swimmers trying to turn around and see what the fuss is about. He puts his arms behind their backs and pushes them onwards, though, leaving me on the shore of the lake with the leader. "What do we do?" I cry in a panic, but he turns towards me and pushes his head over my mouth. "You need to stay here, and stay quiet. If you try to attract the other canoe, you'll attract them, and nobody wants that. I'm going to swim out and try to get the other canoe. If you hear me blow my whistle again, though, you need to go back to your own group." "Okay," I whisper in reply. The leader looks at me pityingly and, with a sad smile, dives into the lake. I watch as he paddles with all his speed to the non-rocking canoe, reaching them out at an astounding speed. I watch their faces as he rapidly speaks to them. They're first incredulous, then worried, then downright terrified. He looks pointedly at them and they nod, and with a sigh of relief I see them making their way back to the shore. The other canoe, however, isn't so lucky. I watch in horror as the claws latch around the edge of the boat, and an impossibly skinny black figure pulls itself onto the boat. Even from a distance, I can see its mouth slowly opening to an impossible angle and slowly lowering the other camper's head. It clamps its jaws shut, and with a sickening crunch decapitates one of the campers, his body slumping on the boat. The creature's attention turned to the other trembling camper, but I have to turn away. The image replays in my mind, and I run back to my dorm. I'm about to enter when suddenly a deep dread settles in my stomach. There were 2 canoes, each with 2 campers, and 3 swimmers. 7 campers, just like the rules said there should be. But this morning before I left the dorm, I counted 8.